Hang on, give me a second here. I'm not quite there yet. I just
The
realized I don't even know.
fucking Irish fucking
All right, here we go. Hello.
fucking YouTube cunt.
Are we? Good God, we're already in trouble, and you're sober.
Yeah.
All right. Yes. So, hello. Sorry for that outrageous profanity.
Yes.
Your ears, I'm sure, are burning.
No,
but,
I shall. Yeah, no, I should. I'll do it. I'll do it properly in the way they do in the loop, right? I'll. This is literary as F star cunt.
Oh, perfect. Yes. Hello, and welcome to Literary as Feck, the show where myself, Nicholas O'Shenanigans, and himself,
Cunt Clive, Cunt Davis, the cunt.
That's the one. Yes. Talk about literature. Yeah. so that you could elevate your mind.
Yeah.
And,
well, I think I'm doing that already.
No question. So this time it was my choice, and I chose a book called Hellraisers, which for some reason when I got, and this is from Random House, when I got the ebook, this is the cover.
Oh,
did you get it? Did you get an actual cover on the version that you read? Because this is abysmal. Anyway.
Yes, I did have a proper cover on mine. Yeah, by Robert Sellers, you forgot to mention.
And yes, by Robert Sellers.
Yes. So this is basically a this is a book. It's quite fascinating. I didn't realize that the Cenobites had drinking problems.
Oh yes, yeah. Indeed, yes. Particularly the
There we go. That went down well.
Particularly the fat one, I think. He was quite well known for being fond of a few.
I'm blaming the delay. Otherwise, you would have been rooting.
I would have been guffawing. Yes. No question. So yes, this book is in fact about 4 notorious actor/alcoholics.
Yes.
Or alcoholics/actors. I'm not sure. To be honest, after reading this book, you kind of feel like maybe alcoholic came first for most of them in terms of their actual priorities. But the Richard Burton, fine Welshman, 2 Irish fellas, one kind of English Irish, Peter O'Toole, an Irish fella.
Fittingly as well, he's the one who's like the most patriotic as well, right? Like,
yeah, of course.
In that Shane McGowan way, like you can be really patriotic about Ireland if you don't live.
If you never had to live there, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, although it was funny because Richard Harris, who's proper Limerick-born Irishman, but then I was laughing because later in the book, quite near the end, he apparently gets involved in a fist fight with Frank McCourt, the writer of Angela's Ashes, because he has besmirched the honor of fair Limerick.
Right. Right.
But Richard Harris clearly felt no need to live anywhere near Limerick or Ireland, for that matter, for the vast majority of his life. So I don't know why his nose is out of joint.
Peter O'Toole was when he did go to live there was in Connemara, right? If I'm right.
Yes. Yeah, he was probably hoping that he'd get a job with one of those Roger Corman,
Right. And Richard Burton from not exactly, but the region of Talbot, right, which is also where Anthony Hopkins and Michael Sheen are from as well.
Yeah, I have a hard time putting Michael Sheen in the same bracket. I can very easily, partly maybe because they're both sort of Shakespearean actors, and really the timbre of their voices is very similar. Like I think when I hear Sir Anthony Paycheck talk, I hear Richard Burton.
Clearly a massive influence on him.
But I don't with Sheen. I don't hear it at all.
Well, he does have. I
don't even hear it.
Anthony Hopkins gets a bit of a look in this book as well, right, briefly, because he had his own alky period, but he's been sold since like 1976 or something, right? But you get these little flashes apart from these main 4.
Yes. It's quite nice that you get your America, you get your Robert Mitchums and your Lee Marvins, and you get
Well, we already know about Robert Mitchum because we read the biography, right? Baby, I Don't Care.
Yes. Apparently,
read.
Taking his dick out and pissing on people or threatening to was apparently an across the board, like, you know, because there's at least one mention of it here that I was like, didn't remember from the other book.
Right. Yeah, you know, you want the collected piss stories of
Robert Mitchum. Yes. Yeah. But yeah, so basically,
I'm sorry, Oliver Reed. You didn't mention.
And of course, yes.
Yes.
And it's a bit of a timeline as well, right? Because we, in a way, you know, Richard Burton is kind of the elder statesman.
First out the gate, yeah.
You know, and then Oliver Reed is kind of, although weird enough, not last man standing, as it turns out.
No, and in fact, when this book was written, Peter O'Toole was still alive.
Yes.
But he did die in 2013, right?
Yeah.
I did actually have to look that up because I wasn't sure. I was like, pretty sure Peter was dead, but I'm not sure because he did kind of look like a walking cadaver for the last
quite a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, it's I mean, the thing is basically it's going to be quite episodic, right? I mean, we because we're cutting back and forward constantly between all four of our protagonists, and at times in some ways they're kind of like because they're not all contemporaneous age-wise. I find that aspect of the book slightly confusing at times because like Oliver Reed
gets sidelined for a bit, doesn't he?
Yeah,
especially in the late 50s because there doesn't seem to be much going on. So what they do is they rotate. They go like Burton, Harris, O'Toole, Reed, Burton, O'Toole. But every now and again it's Burton, O'Toole, Harris, skip, Reed, round to Burton again, right?
Yeah.
For a few stretches of the book. And that happens. But it's interesting considering it's quite a long book. And it is, I suppose you could argue it is repetitive. It's basically Richard Burton got pissed and then he did this film. And then Richard Harris, you'll never believe this. He got a film, I got pissed, and then you'll never guess, right? Peter O'Toole, you know what he went and did? He got pissed and he made a film. Oliver Reed, what do you think he did? You know, and you could imagine that would become tiring, but oddly enough, he manages to keep the balls in the air, dribbling all the way. I didn't tire with this book, although I suspect it probably could have been edited down a little bit.
Yes, yeah. But really, no, I agree. In fact, it was like it's quite an easy read, and I killed this book quite a bit faster, given the size of it. I thought, oh, this might take me a while, but I read it in like 3 days, just like.
I drank as well, of course, during the majority of it because
obviously
it would seem disrespectful to do otherwise.
Not to.
Yeah.
So at that point, it just becomes almost like, well, which stories from the book do we want to talk about? Like because there's so many. My mind is so. Like, you know, digitally dog-eared, like every second page, I have a friggin'
So I think that's what we'll do. How about this? Let's just say that basically 4 very gifted actors got drunk a lot and caused lots of trouble and made some good films and died. That's about it.
Yes.
I don't think there's
they had quite a bit of sex too. It's probably worth mentioning.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
They fucked around a lot, and
they're all heterosexual.
Quite a lot.
They're all heterosexual, which is interesting. But it's interesting. You know, what I mean is there isn't really much of a grander thesis beyond that, right? He doesn't really tie the 4 of them up and make a case for like.
No, he doesn't really dig into them psychologically too much. You know.
No.
Although I did like. I mean, you can draw your own conclusions, but I did like. It's Richard Burton, right, whose dad never went to see any of his movies because there was too many pubs between their house and the cinema.
Yeah, that seems like a bit of a bit of a print legend rather than, you know.
Right.
I mean, sure he could have probably made it. But it's a fun. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here actually that's a bit.
Yes.
You feel as if
on the edge.
Robert Ellis has just taken for granted that something's true and didn't, because he is interested in the legend, he is interested in the myth, right?
Yes.
And some of it sometimes doesn't quite add up logically. Like, hang on, is that even possible to do that?
Right.
Yes. Without dying, or they just need a little bit more detail or something, or you know, there's like a story about like, is it Peter O'Toole like at any in the middle of the night or something, would just sidle up to any pub in his area, somewhere in London, I think, and knock on the door, like, "It's me, Peter," and they'd like let him in afterwards, and like that's like, yeah, I'm wondering how many doors he went knocking on until one opened, or just little things like that, But as long as you take it with a grain of salt, and a whiskey chaser, then it's definitely a fun read. So with that in mind, getting that out of the way, yeah, we'll jump about and just talk about some. The one other thing I wrote down as well, actually, because it's a book that is more of a celebration than taking a hard look at the collateral damage of these men, and it's very much you can imagine now this book would be written in a very different. We're living in a slightly different era now, right? Where so I wrote this down. I wrote, "Why the forgiveness and even affection for some truly horrible behavior? Maybe because there isn't the sense of entitlement. So I don't think that they think I'm allowed to get away with this because of who I am, but rather, why isn't everyone else doing this? Do you know what I mean? There's not necessarily that bullying aspect, except maybe Oliver Reed was apparently a proper school bully at some point.
Oh yeah, that whole
thing. Yarns. I could just see him. Yeah. Thank you, school bully. Yeah, he comes from that because he's the one as well that comes from more a kind of
posh.
Yes, I mean Richard Harris started, but didn't Richard Harris's parents
quite quickly
lose everything?
Family money, disappeared.
And certainly Burton and O'Toole didn't. But it seems as if Oliver Reed's the posh boy of this crowd, right?
And maybe the most damaged in a way. Like I felt like, even reading the book, he really seemed the most like. It was interesting to me. The other ones, like, they were maybe on some sort of suicide mission, but I don't think they all kind of were able to hold back, or but where he just felt like he was absolutely.
They seem like they had a lot more fun. Like they just do japes, and then a lot of Oliver Reed's stuff seems like very aggressive and competitive, and like even, I know apparently Richard Harris had a horrible temper, right? Like very violent, but it felt a little bit more. I don't know, like. Yeah, Oliver seemed more like he had a chip on his shoulder or something.
Yes.
But again, this is unfair. We well, as far as I know, neither of us have met any of these four gentlemen, right?
No, God.
Well, you
based on this book.
I would have loved to have attempted to drink along with. Yeah.
Right.
Yes. So. Take it away, Nick. Anything you wanted to mention? Because I've got loads. I don't know if we'll get through all of these. As
I said, I mean, it's really hard.
Well,
to begin.
Either of us jump in whenever we have.
Okay, yeah. So you feel free to start us off there, and I'll just kind of scan through my.
Some people they mentioned Brooke Williams, a drinking partner of Richard Burton for a while, who was the son of Emlyn Williams, the playwright. Okay. Who I was in a production of one of his plays, Night Must Fall, about the man who may or may not be carrying a severed head around in a hat box. That's again, like I said, just something that popped up. That's all I have to say about it. Just interesting that the characters that pops up. Trevor Howard, because there's a lot of little mini. There's like here's some other fucked up drinkers, right?
Right.
Trevor Howard, he gets someone I need to look more into. I think I'd like to read some more about him. Marlon Brando almost played Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah.
No, glad that didn't happen. That would have been a very morose kind of.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know, like very. Inward-looking Lawrence of Arabia, wouldn't it?
Very self-serious.
Yeah, I'm glad we didn't get that film. Interesting as well on that film, in a break on that film, both Peter O'Toole and Sharif get busted along with Lenny Bruce.
Yes.
Fascinating.
Yes.
Anecdote. Apparently, they went to see him. I think O'Toole was a fan. Took Sharif along. They went to see Lenny Bruce live. Went back to his place. Lenny Bruce started shooting up. And then
heroin.
The came in. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. He also talks about getting them getting the clap together in wherever they were filmed.
Another fascinating. I don't know if this is true. I've not had a chance to look it up. Are camels trained to protect their fallen riders? This is something they mention that.
Right.
I found that fascinating. Do they do that to camels? Like get in front of their owners and protect them from other camels?
Maybe, but there's also a part where it doesn't. Way later on in his career, O'Toole come out on David Letterman's show riding a camel.
That's right. Yes.
Right. So he obviously kept up his relationship.
Sorry, just a little. I assume you must have seen Lawrence of Arabia at some point in your life.
Like when I was a kid, I haven't seen it in so long. I just barely, it's a bit like I probably saw Zulu around the same time, and I barely have, a little image snatches. But I'd love to go back actually and see both of them again.
It is one of those films, I think, Lawrence of Arabia. You have like those proper like benchmark classics, but I don't know. It is such a masterpiece in so much as it's, on the one hand, it's very like, this is the print the legend, maybe not entirely true epic version of the story, but in it as well are all these really interesting subtle allusions to what might be the real story, or the non, not in a way that gets in the way of the story at all. It's very difficult to explain, but it is one of those few true classics, I think, which is just like, this is the classic epic, but also it'll send you down several rabbit holes. I love Lawrence of Arabia. I think you should definitely watch it now that you're grown up enough to
appreciate it properly. Yeah.
And I would love to go see it on a big. I've never seen it on a big screen, but I think that's one of those films you probably should definitely see on a big screen if you ever get the chance, right?
There's a moment just in the O'Toole early life section that jumped out at me. The one Christmas Eve where his dad comes home drunk, and the excited young O'Toole says, "Is Father Christmas coming?" And his dad goes outside and bursts a paper bag and says, "Sorry, Santa's just shot himself."
Yeah, that's just after another bit where he gets his lad to go up on like a mantelpiece or something and say, "Oh, you fall off, I'll catch you," and doesn't. And
yes,
that'll teach you. Don't trust anyone.
I mean, again, whether those are just stories that Peter O'Toole liked to tell because he was a yarn spinner or not, but regardless, they're great stories, whether they're true or not. Yeah.
Guilty.
And yet I love their version of The Taming of the Shrew because it's so real, because there's this palpable tension, right, in any of the performances they share together, right?
Well, I suppose the peak of it is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, right? That's
yes.
It's kind of interesting that they went there, because isn't there someone mentions in the book that someone warns them like, "Oh man, you don't want to be doing that, like a real married couple don't want to be doing that because there's too much real stuff in there." But I suppose they would have been through so much that they were the couple to do it, right? I can't think of anyone else who might have done it with such venom,
One of my favorite stories of him is just him being, I think it's in Camelot, maybe on the stage, where he's had 17 pints of like India Pale Ale or whatever, and then asks to go to the toilet, and they're like, "No, like we can't," and he just fills his entire armor suit with piss, basically.
Yeah.
And then someone inherits the suit later on, like in like a following performance or whatever, and is like, "Yeah, it was disgusting inside. It was all stained yellow."
That seems like one of those. Not sure if that's true.
Yeah,
right.
but
pissing, but I don't know if it actually would retain the yellow
right.
hue. But speaking of classic films, have you ever seen The Lion in Winter with Peter O'Toole and Katharine Hepburn? And
no.
you should see The Lion in Winter. It's brilliant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's quite interesting as well. There's a whole section on, Peter O'Toole and Katharine Hepburn just kind of playfully.
Yes.
That was quite interesting. Didn't know that Oliver Reed was Carol Reed's nephew. I didn't know that. Probably should have known that.
No. Yeah. That was interesting. Yeah, because at one point, there's a description of basically a casting couch situation where Oliver Reed pulls the uncle's name out, basically to be like, "Hey, I'm not going down for this malarkey." But yes, yeah.
Richard Harris was once in a Brendan Behan play. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. The Brendan Behan stuff was all depressing because he was definitely one way.
Learned you should never, ever, under any circumstances, get in a car driven by Peter O'Toole.
Yes, yeah, or Richard Burton. They both were constantly just crashing their cars.
There's a really good story about, speaking of crashing, as I really like the story about, is it Richard Burton's granddad, who was apparently was he in a wheelchair or something, and he bet money on a horse called Black Sambo.
Oh yes.
And one got smashed and then lost control of his wheelchair and died. Basically.
Yes.
Yeah. So it seems to be in the blood, right? In the book.
Oh yeah.
And kind of there's a few mentions of him at various points in his career, the Burton clan would be flown to wherever in the world to join in a premiere or something.
Mm-hmm. There was just a little aside about some set he was on where he flubbed a line 4 or 5 times and then just turned around and ran headlong into a wall with it head first because he was so frustrated with himself, just the lack of impulse control, I guess, it makes sense. I mean, basically, all 4 of these guys would have failed the marshmallow test, no questions asked, if you know what I'm talking about.
The marshmallow test.
Yes. All right. Very in a nutshell, the marshmallow test is a famous psychological test given to children. I don't remember when, but long enough ago that they were able to track the outcomes of these children into adulthood. Basically, kids were put in a room, and marshmallow was put in front of them on a plate, and they were told, basically, if you wait 2 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever, I'm going to leave the room. If I come back in and the marshmallow is still there, I'm going to give you a second marshmallow.
Okay.
And so they then filmed what the kids did in the process of trying to basically deny themselves instant gratification.
Right.
And the kids supposed, I mean, and so we could quickly talk about there's problems with this model, and they've talked about them since. But anyway, they did track the outcomes of the kids who immediately ate the marshmallow versus those who had a skill set where they were able to distract themselves or do other things, and who got the second marshmallow. And the kids who instantly gratified their needs had a much higher incidence of ending up addicted to drugs, drink, or in jail.
That's
however,
because I was going to say the opposite, because you're probably, from what I've heard about the way that you eat food, you might have been a kid who grabbed the first marshmallow, where I certainly would have waited for the second marshmallow. Yet I'm probably more of an addictive personality than you are.
I don't know that I wouldn't have waited. I was a pretty well behaved kid, and I don't feel like I needed. But so what's interesting is
you do eat all the things that you like best on a plate and leave the stuff you don't like. Because you've told me that, and that's not how I roll at all.
I did that as a kid. I don't know that I do that as much anymore. But But yeah, so I think, but anyway, so you know, what they didn't really account for was things like socioeconomic status, right?
Yeah, a kid might be hungry than another kid.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Like if a kid is starving, and then you know, and then outcomes for those kids are not going to be great for various other reasons, right?
Yeah.
Or
kids, issues with having been lied to, right? Like
that's exactly.
Why would that?
Exactly.
Well, I'm not guaranteed a second marshmallow. I'm having this now. Yeah.
Adults, I don't trust adults because the adults in my life let me down all the time. So I'm just going to take what I can while
I know it's unfair, but it's amazing in retrospect. Sometimes you hear some of these, and like the pitfalls are so apparent to us in the modern world. Like anyone would immediately say those things, right? It's amazing to think of a world where that never occurred to proper trained scientists, right?
Yes.
But there we go.
That said, I do feel like all four of these gentlemen would have failed the marshmallow test. Like, these are people who wanted and needed instant gratification of all kinds.
Or pissed on your marshmallow.
Yeah, exactly.
Or so get this fucking marshmallow out of here and give me a drink.
God, you know, I'd forgotten that Lee Marvin was as much of a piss tank.
Oh yeah, that leads us to another film you definitely have to watch, is The Klansman.
Okay, right.
Richard Burton and Lee Marvin.
And like that set must have been.
Oh, I mean, you can clearly see on screen that they're both
hungover all the time.
Yeah, but drunk, still giving great performances as well. Yes. That's the trick, right? That's the thing, is they were still. I mean, Richard Burton, especially if the stories in here are to be believed. I mean, Harris, O'Toole, and Reed. Well, actually, no, both Burton and Reed seem to be like they just turn up on time the next, like hollow legs, right? Just
yes,
able to imbibe massive amounts and not miss. Harris and O'Toole seem a little bit more you know.
I think Harris got emotional. I think I get the impression that he would freak out and then kind of lose his shit. But yeah, Richard Harris. I mean, that whole, you know, that breakdown of that first marriage and then the custody stuff, you know, I mean, a lot of O'Toole custody stuff in this as well, actually. But Harris, have you ever heard that song, This Is Our Child by Richard Harris? It's kind of one of those famous.
No, I don't think I have. No.
Things that shows up on like best of, like, oh my God, what the.
I may have, yes, it does ring a bell, but.
Like incredibly strange music kind of compilations will often pull that off. It's off of one of the later, like the third album, maybe, you know, MacArthur Park, and then there's the whatever it is, The Yard Went On Forever, which are both, let me get, their Jimmy Webb albums, so they're actually amazing albums, and they're meant. The lyrics are like, someone left a cake out in the rain, and whatever, like just anyway.
Is that marshmallow they left out? They were waiting for the second.
Exactly. But This Is Our Child is him singing basically about their child in this very aggressively intense, terrifying kind of way. Right. They say he looks like his mother, but I'm pretty sure he looks like me. Like he's barely singing, he's kind of barking this madness. It's great.
Also worth mentioning Oliver Reed's fantastic recollection of him and his brother
sleeping with the Swedish au pair
who put the thermometer in places that she shouldn't have been doing in a bed with two preteen even.
It's not even clear what age they're supposed to be. Yes.
I mean, yes, entirely inappropriate behavior, but also, you know, nice one, Oliver, and his, like, what a memory to have, right? And of all things, of all the stereotypes, you could, a Swedish au pair, right? Like, you couldn't make it up, or maybe you could.
You could. Yes.
Also, staying on Oliver Reed, also worth noticing that one of his favorite drinks was called gunk, which was ice bucket full of everything.
Yeah, whatever was left in everyone's, you know, I mean, that's one of those things, like, you read about that, people who run around the pub basically emptying other people's, like, that's one of those, like, next level.
I've done that. I'm guilty of having drunk.
Okay.
Yeah, no. I have my own history of marking my territory with piss when I've blacked out. As you know, I've told you that story before.
This is true.
And also potentially having lost my virginity, but not remembering anything because I was strangled by someone.
Yes.
Took advantage of my prone 16-year-old body.
Clive. Sad.
I don't mind. I wish I could remember it.
My only experiences of that nature were cake-based. I remember working at a restaurant once where I was so hungry on my shift that I took somebody's half-eaten cheesecake into the toilet and sat on the toilet. And yeah, that's a great face.
Why were you this hungry? I mean,
I can't remember. I grew up in what, as my wife tells you, I grew up in the 1800s, as a chimney sweep. So
apparently so, yeah.
Well, me and low blood sugar, we've had this. You know that I get stroppy, I get emotional.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
So yes, I had to go take care of business. So I ate somebody's leftover food.
Wow.
Anyway,
yeah, I don't know who I am to judge. I had my cherry popped by a complete stranger that I don't remember.
Who's the fellow who plays is it Long John Silver who comes up at one point in the Who's a Party Another Fearful? I think it was Long John Silver. They said he played in like the famous version of Treasure Island from the.
I don't remember. Like I said, I'm drowning in notes.
Right. Yeah. In anecdote.
But yeah. I mean, other things interesting to think about. Like at one point, Richard Burton and Stanley Baker were running around town together. Stanley Baker,
right,
who was originally set to be a James Bond, right before Sean Connery got the nod. It was Stanley Baker.
Right. Right. Yeah.
You mentioning Zulu earlier. Mm-hmm. What else we got here?
The sad story of Michael. I was going to say the sad story of Michael Caine being hired as Peter O'Toole's understudy, and he would spend like up to the last minute before that each performance and then he would just walk in 30 seconds before and go straight onto stage completely drunk and do the job.
Yeah, Michael Caine's kind of interesting. Michael Caine's kind of like the survivor of. He's a little bit older, but a slightly different generation. But you can see him, like he could have maybe potentially gone down a similar. Like he's a bit more restrained and had a kind of longer career and looked after himself a bit more, right? And but I'm sure has a million stories as well, right? The other person actually, the one that jumped out at me the most in terms of I'd really like to learn more about her, and I think there is a biography as well as Rachel Roberts, right? Another Welsh who is in The Sporting Life with Richard Harris, right? And is in. I remember noticing her in Oh Lucky Man. She has a very memorable part in Oh Lucky Man, and yeah, she's the woman who gets drunk and does her dog impression.
Okay. Yes. So Rex, who was it? Rex Harrison.
Harrison's. Yeah. She sounds like
so she shows up in the. She showed up in the Mitchum book first. So as soon as she showed up, I was like, oh, I remember this lady.
Yeah.
The Robert Mitchum book.
Amazing actress as well, but yeah, a particularly horrible death, right? Like, was it she took some pills or something, but then woke up and then staggered through a glass door.
Yeah,
and
she seems to have been truly damaged.
Oh yeah. But definitely need to see more of her work because she was she's fantastic in Oh Lucky Man.
Lindsay Anderson's interesting because he comes up in this, and there's the whole part about how Richard Harris knew that Lindsay Anderson was smitten with him, and then kind of was quite a prick about it, and was able to also leverage it to kind of like get away with stuff on the set of the film, because basically Lindsay Anderson couldn't really reprimand him because he was hopelessly in love with him.
Right.
I
mean, Lindsay Anderson's career is a whole other fascinating chat for another time sometime. Also like the story about when Oliver Reed was an enlisted man in Hong Kong, trip to the beer factory where they're left alone with the tap for like a couple of hours, and then they much beer, and then driven in a truck across some bumpy roads, and everyone just vomits all over everything.
Oh God, yeah.
And then they just tip the truck up, and everything just slides out. Interestingly, I'm wondering if my dad would have been in Hong Kong around the same time. I'm wondering if he witnessed Oliver Reed sliding out of the... yeah, unfortunately, I can't get to ask him anymore. But anything else here? Oh yeah, right. Hang on. This is something I probably should have looked up. The Ladies Not for Burning. What's this?
Okay, The Ladies Not for Burning.
I'm going to see if I can look this up quickly and do it properly. So you mentioned something.
What was the context?
Well, no, I'll get to it if you say something else.
Okay, give me a second.
Oh, here we go. The Ladies Not for Burning is a play by Christopher Fry, right? And it comes up here at some point. I can't remember where it's related. One of these guys was Richard Burton was in The Ladies Not for Burning. But it just got me thinking, and I'd never mentioned this scene, put two and two together before. But Margaret Thatcher, right? Her famous quote, "The ladies not for turning," right? That's so was that actually a reference? Was Margaret Thatcher referencing a play called The Ladies Not for Burning? Because it's a very specific turn of phrase, So, but I've never heard anyone say, like, I've heard that, countless documentaries, people talking about, Thatcher, but I've never heard anyone else say that was a reference to this play. So I wonder if it is or not. It's something that jumped out at me.
Yeah, I don't know. Another thing that struck me was I forgot that Oliver Reed and Keith Moon.
Oh, yeah, that's a night out and a half. You can imagine. That is actually one you might have said, "I'm good. I'm just going back home. I have to wash my hair or something." Yeah. But on the other hand, no, you would have wanted to. That sounds properly dangerous.
Yes, and I feel like it's Oliver Reed who ultimately even has to be like, I can't quite deal with.
But there's one bit level of where Keith Moon's like, "Oh yeah, I had a great time with Ollie. We got drinking, and then we went out, and he played this awesome game when he tried to run him over in his car."
Yes,
he was just running around in the field because Oliver Reed buys this big old
countryside mansion. Yeah.
I've heard they're not in this book, oddly enough, but there's stories about him, like, because he had a weapons collection, but apparently he had this massive oak dining table where he would, entertain, and he had these huge knives that he would insist that guests would carve their names into the desk. And apparently one of the things he'd like to do more than anything else during these banquets was he'd climb up on the table and do impressions of characters from Winnie the Pooh. Which is
awesome.
Odd that that's not in this book.
Yes, but I mean, I think that I'm sure he was spoiled for choice, to be honest. With the people he's talking about, because as I said, there's 4 of them, right?
Another interesting anecdote. Apparently, Peter O'Toole had a stammer all of his life until a rugby injury in which he
kicked in the face. His tongue is split in half.
Yeah, sewn back together, and he's never stammered since.
It did make you actually. It did make me want to go back because I haven't seen Richard Lester's
Three Musketeers.
Three Musketeers in a long time. That's something that I watched as a little kid and absolutely adored. And
as I mentioned to you before, Nick, the other one you need to see around the same time is Richard Lester's Juggernaut with Richard Harris.
Okay.
And Roy Kinnear.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. I should just go back and, I mean, to be honest, most of Richard Lester's films I have enjoyed. So yeah. Anyway, that's just because of the whole talk about how apparently he was so gonzo with the sword fights. And I seem to remember feeling as a kid that it was like more than I expected, you know,
right.
Whenever he was on, you know, as Porthos.
It's funny as well, some of the films that come up here are films that I'm familiar with for a long time, but it's just seeing this in this context is kind of interesting. So, for instance, thinking of him in this context, and then Richard Harris plays A Man Called Horse. Kind of gives it that kind of, that's kind of fascinating. And then I'd never heard of this. So apparently he made a Man Called Horse rip-off as well, called Man in the Wilderness, right? I've never seen that one. But it just got me thinking of the fact that it's amazing, really, that there's an entire Man Called Horse trilogy as well, right? That in its day it was popular enough to... And then the whole Italian cannibal thing kind of...
Oh, yeah. All of those, yes. Deodato, especially more like the 70s ones, kind of pre-cannibal Holocaust. There's a ton of those.
Yeah, man. Well, with, you know, the direct
Ivan Rasimov.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of stuff.
Also reminded me, I've never seen it. I should probably see the Assassination of Trotsky as well. I've never seen that film.
Yep. No, me neither.
A film that I do love a great deal, and I remember recommending it to you before as well, with Peter O'Toole, The Ruling Class, which is a brilliant film. Also with Nigel Green, who gives he's another one we get a little potted history of. He was another very troubled soul. And how about, this is one that I knew he was in it, but it was just this time that is odd. Richard Harris as Cromwell.
Yes.
That's such a weird casting choice.
Yes.
I've never seen that film.
Irish Republican.
Right. Another thing popped out. I'm thinking, I should probably hear that. I've never heard Oliver Reed on Desert Island Discs.
Yes.
That's probably worth listening.
Would think so, yes, for sure.
Also would quite like to go back and rewatch Venom, just to see if I can spot Oliver Reed and Klaus Kinski's on-screen hate to each other. And if that gets boring, I can just watch Susan George as a maid again. So, you know.
Yes.
It's a winner all around, that film. Even though I remember it not being as much fun as it should be, right? Oliver Reed, Klaus Kinski, Susan George, Snake. That should be more fun than I remember it being. Right? But apparently the commentary track is fantastic. So I need to watch that again. Let's see. I'm getting to the. Sorry, listeners or viewers. This has been a bit of a mess, really. But
that's what the book is, and that's what the lives that are being described are.
Darren's dream date, Denham Elliott, turns up. Turns out he had a thing for red wine.
And of course, you know, obviously we're talking about Peter O'Toole. There's a section on the great Tinto Brass.
Yes, Caligula.
Caligula, yes, and
Tiberius, right? If I remember.
Yes.
A syphilitic kind of.
And he's looking particularly cadaverous in that.
Yeah,
at that time of his life.
Favorite O'Toole. He's not in it much, but no, he's great. Actually, this is the one I felt I should recommend, just in case. I don't know if you've ever seen this or read the book, the Geoffrey Household book, Rogue Male. Have you ever heard about the guy who attempts to assassinate Hitler and then kind of goes on the run in the English countryside?
No.
Fantastic book.
Okay.
You would love Rogue Male. But it was turned into a TV movie starring Peter O'Toole, which is one of the best adaptations of a novel, like really faithful and a really
great. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll read it first and then I'll see the film.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Rogue Male. I would be very surprised indeed. I will eat that cake left out in the rain if you don't enjoy that novel and adaptation.
Okay.
Richard Burton, Richard Harris, and Roger Moore stoned in South Africa on the set of Wild Geese. That's another.
Yes, yeah. Which and probably would have been a better thing for them to have all transitioned over to. I would think would have been the Mary Jane. I feel like it might have taken the edge off a little bit.
Yeah, but I feel that's a bit like who is it who sings that song Cocaine, and his doctor offers him some LSD or something. I don't want any of that kid stuff. Give me the real thing. Cocaine.
Reed's one of his favorite haunts of the late 70s was Stringfellow's nightclub, where he enjoyed a game he christened headbutting. Each player was required to smash his head against the opponent until one collapsed or surrendered. A regular victim was the Who's bass player, John Entwistle.
Right.
Who, after being knocked out 3 times, pleaded with the nightclub's owner to ban the game or bar Ollie from the place.
Richard Harris's onstage flatulence apparently being
yes.
being an issue at some point.
Yes. Oh, and then there's also the point at which Oliver Reed has the eagle claws tattooed onto his cock, and then proceeds to take it out at every possible moment where it would or wouldn't be appropriate.
Yes, his mallet, which
yes.
Yes.
In fact, that whole part of, I think, what's the film he's in where he first he was I guess what's one of the creditors, one of the first full frontal male.
Oh, Women in Love.
Women in Love, yeah. Which is that's D.H. Lawrence.
Ken Russell, yeah. Interesting as well to consider another one of his earlier kind of bigger roles was in that the Hammer movie, The Damned, right? The bike.
Yes.
It's quite interesting. I didn't know that apparently Anthony Burgess used that as a big influence on when you were in Orange, right?
I was really interested in that too. Yeah,
I'm quite interested to rewatch that because it's a good film, but I'm interested to rewatch it with that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Also interested in another thing I'd never heard of was this. Was it Peter O'Toole played this real life critic Geoffrey Bernard in a play? Geoffrey Bernard is unwell, right?
Mm-hmm.
That whole thing sounded like something I should probably.
Oh shit!
Investigate.
I wanted to. If I had a time machine, and I could go back and see it's him, right? Who does the super kabuki Macbeth?
Yeah.
He comes out like drenched in blood and that sounded amazing.
I suppose that's the side we're missing in a way that we can't go back, and it's the theatre stuff, right? Because apart from Oliver Reed, all the other 3, were
stage actors.
Yeah. Primarily, that's the way they started out, right? And Oliver Reed famously, I don't know if Oliver Reed ever did a play, or he might have done here and there, but he wasn't about the stage.
You wonder if he had lived, would we have seen like Oliver Reed as the Grand Dame in like pantomime and stuff? Would have been nice.
Well, it's interesting as well to consider variations on, Oliver Reed's Dumbledore, or but you can kind of tell that. I mean, Oliver Reed strikes me as they're all fucking great, obviously, but there's always an element with, especially Burton and O'Toole, I feel, where they need to tone it down a little bit for the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas that brooding intensity of Oliver Reed is perfect for the screen.
Yes.
Right? It's not stage acting, right? It's all internal. Right? Not to say he couldn't get you the scenery every now and again, but he just stands there and and there's so much going on behind the eyes, right?
Well, because he's properly dangerous, and he puts that across in that same way that also I think Harris too. Harris always felt dangerous to me in almost anything, and it's interesting when they had to recast him when he died in the Harry Potter films, they went with another actor who's also has that edge, right? Michael Gambon.
Michael Gambon.
Gambon, sorry, who's also Irish.
Oh, well, I don't know much about Michael Gambon's real life, but certainly he is one scary screen motherfucker.
Yes, yeah.
Because he's, well, he cooked the thief, his wife, and his lover for a start, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I someone I've come to appreciate a little bit more in recent years. Like, obviously, Michael Gambon's always been there, but only recently I've really started. Oh, fuck, that Michael Gambon's. He's a hell of a screen presence, right? Like,
yes, it's just weird that they picked two like actors with quite a bit of edge to play this. You know,
I suppose that's why it doesn't necessarily, as a testament to, I mean, it doesn't necessarily work its spell on us so much, even though I'm sure we both don't mind it. But obviously, for the younger generation who grew up with those films, those films are very important, and I think one of the secret is great casting, right? I mean,
yes, yeah.
Like I can't remember which film she turns up in, but like the one Imelda Staunton turns up in, she's
yes,
great, right?
Yeah, she's brilliant.
Yeah. So anyway, we should probably wind this up.
Yes, yeah, I think so. I mean, I would say, I personally, so here's what I'm going to say. This, I thoroughly enjoy this. But
what a surprise that you said that.
Yes. My mum would hate this book.
Okay.
To a degree almost unimaginable, I feel. My mum likes to read stories of people who have come to Jesus moments. She likes to read stories about people who go off the rails, but then, have that moment where they're like, oh my God, I've been terrible to my kids. I've wrecked my marriage. I need to be a better person. And, my mum is the child of an alcoholic.
Right.
And so, at a certain point, when talking, and I lived with my granddad for the first 20 years of my life. And, my mom, at one point, she just kind of said, like, you have to accept when you're the child of a drunk that the alcohol always comes first. Like, that's what the addiction is, right? So everything else comes second. So if this person has an opportunity to get drunk, they're not going to worry about, like, well, it is the christening of my child, or this is the first thing or whatever. Like, no, there's a free bar. I'm going to go.
It's like a junkie.
And do that.
Yeah. Stay away from this book.
And so, and that. Yes, and so I think it's a hard thing for a child to accept that, like, oh, like, unfortunately, my parent who should put me first puts this other thing first, right? Yeah. So what I was saying is this book resolutely does not deliver that mea culpa. That in fact, anything like one of the final, I mean, all of them seem to go to their death in the book, at least, kind of saying, like, I made my choices. I lived my life the way I wanted to live it. And in fact, Richard Harris's children, like, dip their fingers in Guinness and rub it on his lips as he dies. Like, it's like it's right.
I do quite like, as an actor, I have to say, Richard Harris's son Jared, who was in Mad Men, for example, for a while.
Okay.
There,
I don't think
very good.
We're aware that there was that relationship for whatever reason.
No, Jared Harris is I like Jared Harris quite a bit. He also was he played Andy Warhol in one film, I think.
Okay.
No, interesting actor in his own right. I've always quite liked Jared. Yes, on balance, I would also like to say, in respect to your mother's opinion, I quite like the unrepentant attitude, because it's something that's always wound me up a little bit about people who've been through whatever, and then go around telling people, you shouldn't do that, because
it always feels like having your cake and eating it too.
Fun. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I won't be going around telling people not to do those things that I did, because I probably wouldn't. There's some demons you need to get out your system, let's put it that way. And you hope that you manage to pull yourself back in time. But if you don't, that could almost be as bad, right? To be some embittered old fuck who, didn't indulge to a certain degree. I mean, that's the other side, right? The roads of excess leads to the palace of either access or wisdom if you're listening to Marky Smith or William Blake, right?
Yes.
Right. I think we're probably done with this.
I think so.
Time
but
to
anyway,
the
book's lots of fun. If you like stories of rip roaring narcissism, male stupidity, and it's good. Fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would quite like to read the follow-up with Elizabeth Taylor, Rachel Roberts, and maybe another 2 sozzled as well.
Agreed.
That would be interesting to compare.
Yeah.
So yeah, until that book comes along and we talk about it around here. Bye.
Toodle pip.